I'm now in a difficult situation, and I honestly don't know what to do. I'll start at the beginning. 5 years ago, my next-door neighbor Charlie, or Charles as we call him, informed me of the abduction of his 14-year-old son. He reported it to the police. It made headlines and was widely publicized. My wife and I felt terrible and always volunteered to help them in any way we could. As the years passed with no word from their son, we thought they came to terms with the situation and understood the worst had happened. My wife and I never had the nerve to inquire whether the body was ever discovered. Charles and his wife would occasionally invite me and my wife to join them for a cookout. During the warmer months, we noticed that both Charles and his wife had changed significantly since their child went missing. Charles's wife, Kathy, was always calmer and more reserved, while Charles appeared more awkward and uneasy, which was acceptable to some extent. A few years later, just last week, Charles approached me while I was taking out the garbage and asked me to help. Borrow a shovel without hesitation. I dashed to grab my best shovel. Without asking why he needed it, he thanked me, explaining that he only needed to perform some work in his backyard and would return it to me by tomorrow. He then disappeared into his backyard. I returned inside, and as I stood by one of my upstairs windows with an excellent view of Charlie's backyard, I noticed him digging a huge hole in the ground. He appeared to be suffering slightly. He is 56 after all. I assumed I'd go get my second shovel and help him out. I entered his backyard and called his name. He looked up from what he was doing, dropped my shovel and hurried up to me, exclaiming, "No, it's fine with him. I received it. Please leave." I asked, "What is wrong with you?" "It's not a big problem, mostly due to his strange reaction." He warned me, "I won't let you use that shovel in my backyard," and pointed to the fence as if I were a dog. I was so taken aback by his behavior that I abruptly departed without saying anything else. I walked upstairs to spy on him from the window. He dug the pit for at least another half hour. When it appeared that he was finished, he began gazing around, particularly up high at surrounding houses, as if to ensure that no one was observing. Then, before I could consider hiding, he caught sight of me at my window. At that time, all I could do was nonchalantly stroll away. He's up to something, and I wanted to know what. I kept looking at his backyard, but he had stopped digging. I believed he knew I was monitoring and would wait until it was dark out, which was around 1:30 p.m. In the morning, I heard a shovel hitting the earth outside. It was too dark to see anything from my window, so I went outside silently and glanced over the fence in the backyard. I could see him digging clearly now. When he walked inside his house, I took advantage of the chance to sneak into his backyard and investigate the contents of the hole he was digging. The moonlight revealed a small piece of a black rubbish bag protruding from the mud at the bottom of the hole. I gazed at his back door for a moment, then turned my attention back to the hole. I contemplated checking the contents of the bag 3 more times. In the end, I chose to escape back to my backyard, which was a good thing because he came back outside seconds later, but he wasn't digging. Instead, he fled to the other side of his house and did not return. I returned home and gently went back to bed, hoping not to wake my wife. The next morning, I looked out my window and saw that Charles's backyard hole had been entirely patched up. I also realized that the SUV was now parked on the street rather than in his driveway. Whatever transpired during the remainder of the night, the presence of his son's body in the pit is unsettling. For all I know, he dug up that hole to take whatever he had previously buried down there and then drove it somewhere else to dump it. This is all guesswork. Call me crazy if you will. I haven't consulted anyone, including my wife, and I honestly don't know what to do. Charles never returned my shovel. I'm not going to ask him about it. In fact, he has been avoiding me ever since. However, something strange happened yesterday. I was looking out my window at Charlie's house when I noticed him standing at one of his windows, peering into mine. When he noticed me, he closed his blinds, even though it was the middle of the day. I'm utterly terrified and unsure of what to do. Music. I've also lived in 3 houses throughout my life, with my family at my current home and by myself. We resided in the first house for the first 15 years of my life. I lived in the second house for the next 7 years until moving into my current home. This incident occurred in my first home when I was 15 years old, during the final few months of my family's stay there. I don't recall my family ever being particularly accommodating with the neighbors. In fact, there were 2 kids living next door with their father, with whom my brother and I had only spoken once or twice in our entire lives. As strange as that seems, we knew both of their names, Eric and Todd. One day, my 5-year-old younger brother, we were outside playing basketball in the driveway. That's when one of the 2 boys next door, despite the heat, came outside and approached us, starting a chat. I don't recall the exact words we exchanged, but his first question was whether we were planning to move. As the older brother, I did the majority, if not all, of the talking. Todd was probably around the same age as myself. I never asked him, but at the end of our conversation, he invited me to join him and his brother in firing BB guns by the river, the woods down the road. The following day, I accepted the invitation because it was the weekend and I had no other plans. My younger brother requested that he come at the last minute, not assuming that he had already been invited. Todd said yes and walked away. Eric and Todd rang the doorbell late the next day, just before dusk. We quickly answered the door because our parents were unaware that we were heading out to shoot BB guns while Todd and Eric were dressed in camouflage. Carrying a duffel bag full of BB guns felt weird. The seriousness with which these 2 approached the situation was unfamiliar to me and my brother, causing us to meet eyes and suppress our laughter several times. When we arrived in the woods, we barely exchanged words. I could see these 2 were kids. A few words might explain why we hadn't met them officially until that moment. Todd placed the duffel bag on the ground and unzipped it, while Eric forcefully snapped a branch from a tree and flung it into the river. The brothers stared at each other again, this time not finding it as amusing. Todd pulled out a pair of firearms and handed them to me and my brother. At that moment, Todd dropped the bomb and informed us that these were real guns. Eric took the loaded gun from his rucksack and began firing at the woods across the river. When it dawned on me that he was not joking about the firearms being genuine, I became frustrated and confused. I took the rifle from my brother and returned it to the bag. I informed them that we weren't comfortable with this and had. Eric extinguished the fire as we were about to leave, and both boys gazed at us with half-angry expressions. As we walked away, one of the 2 boys cursed at us. I always suspected these 2 were nasty kids, and this confirmed it. I told my brother not to talk to them during our stay. We informed our parents at supper that night that they were well-reared children, but we didn't raise the gun issue. That night, I woke up to a rush of cool air on my face. My window was open, completely open. As I looked out the window, I felt something firm pressed against the back of my head and heard someone behind me say, "Shoo." I didn't yell or jump. I simply remained quiet. I was able to figure out what was going on rather quickly. Todd's voice came from behind me in a whisper. He said that if I told anyone, especially his father, about the firearms or the visit, he would come back and kill me and my family. "Okay," I said in a hushed, hesitant voice. He nudged my head with his revolver and then departed through the window. For months, I would see Todd or Eric standing at a specific window of their house, staring into my room or my brother's. As we approached the date of our transfer, their behavior became increasingly bizarre. Just a week before we moved, a rock was hurled at my window around 1 a.m. When I opened my window and saw Todd shooting a pistol at it, I collapsed onto the ground in terror, only to hear the 2 boys laughing nearby. One of them overheard me being called a underserved.